Hi, ladies.
Hello.
Hi.
So happy to be here and hosting this wonderful show for the Unicorn Way, all about following your true north. And we're going to be dip diving into some hot topics today regarding sacred sexuality, regarding commercial sex, regarding everything sexual. We're going to let it flow, and we're going to allow whatever wants to surface. This is an exploration, and it's also simply a conversation and discussion to help other women reflect on their own process, their own healing process, to reflect on their own sexuality and their own femininity as the divine feminine continues to rise. So I have to start things off and to give the audience a good idea as to where we're coming from. Do we have any feminists in the house?
I am kind of a feminist, but not wholeheartedly a feminist. I think the feminist movement has gone a little too far for my liking in not the right direction, but that's my own opinion.
Yeah, me too. I think it's definitely gone to an extreme. Kimberly, you're good?
Yeah, I concur.
Yeah?
I think we should start by introducing ourselves, really.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that.
Let's just start by going around. Kim, where are you from? Where you been? Tell us about you.
Originally from outside of Portland, Oregon, and now living in Sedona, Arizona. Had a few other places along the way. Scottsdale, Arizona, Santa Monica, California. And now I'm anchored here in Sedona.
Excellent. And what is your history with the sex world? Do you have a vast experience with the sex world? Are you sheltered from the sex world? Tell us what was your sexual life like?
Yeah, it was traumatic from the beginning.
Oh, interesting.
And I've gone through secretly, going to just waitress at a strip club to ending up, having that first dance, and then was kind of off into somewhere else while I was still on campus at Arizona State.
How old were you at this time?
What's that?
How old were you at this time? 18. 19.
So it started there, and it's run a pretty full gamut. I think when it really became very impactful in my life was when I actually would hook up with a pimp. And so I've worked at a legal brothel, the Mustang Ranch.
Oh, I know that place.
What's that?
I know the Mustang Ranch.
A lot of people do.
Yep. All right. So you've been around the block a few times, we can say.
Yeah, and it would end in LA, and that was where I went to acting school and really started to understand why I had done the things I'd done and how I got there. Because I certainly don't remember being a little girl and being like, you know what? I'm going to get really fucking pissed at my dad, and then I'm going to go off and do really rebellious shit. And, kind of working through that and healing that relationship.
Excellent. Okay, so Jessica, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your sex life, like what your sex history, your kind of beingness as a sexual being?
Well, it's really interesting. After making a comment on one of my little videos that I posted on my Facebook, this like kind of subconscious belief about commercial sex came into clear view. And I really started thinking about it. I'd made the comment about believing that commercial sex is something that we shouldn't be feeding into. And it was such a big statement. Hi, Marina. We lost you for a bit.
I know. I'm so sorry about that. I have no idea what's going on with my internet.
Okay.
It's going crazy.
Well, we started, so we're just, Kimberly was just talking about talking a little bit about her role as a sex worker.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah, and I'm just now talking about how this all came about and why I wanted to have the opportunity to speak with different women about commercial sex, but also about just their sexuality. And Kelly was asking me exactly, what my sexual background is. And I don't have a background in commercial sex. I've never received money for sex. I've never even been offered money for sex. but I have been around a lot of other women who have.
But it doesn't mean you haven't sold yourself for sex. Just because you don't take cash doesn't mean you're not selling yourself for sex,
What do you mean?
Well, if a guy buys you dinner and you're using a guy to pay for things, I mean, that's honestly almost the same thing.
Oh yeah,
But
definitely.
It's
I don't.
equal exchange, right?
But I've always been like, I'm on the opposite side of the spectrum. Like, I won't even let a guy buy me a drink in a bar because I fear that I automatically fall under that category of like being bought for sex. Like so for me, where I come from, and my background is a little bit different because I was born into generational wounds already where women were being exploited. I was already in this protective mode growing up. And one of the first encounters that I had after that was with a young girl at camp when I was about 6 years old. And we were like 6, 7. And I was there for 2 weeks. We went away for camp. And she gravitated towards me. And she literally cried the whole time. And she was being sexually exploited by her father and her father's friends. And it left such a big impact on me. Later on, when I came back into the city, I asked my mom to contact her. I wanted to see her again. She was absolutely amazing. And we brought her out to La Ronde, and we had an amazing day. And then I asked her to tell my mom the story. I didn't know what to do at that age, but I knew it was wrong, and I knew someone had to do something. So my mom contacted social services, and I never saw her again. And then that was just one of many, many women that I met along the way that were being sexually exploited from a very young age. So I was at the complete opposite. I was always in total protection mode, and I'd spend years being celibate, not wanting to put myself into situations where I felt like I might be exploited. Mm-hmm. So, but I've also been around tons of prostitutes, strippers, you name it, because mm-hmm. I've been a tomboy most of my life. So, I understand, like, I have absolutely no judgment towards any woman who was feeling, that this was the path for them, because I believe every path is sacred. And
Great.
Yeah.
Well, what about you, Marina? Tell us a little bit about yourself. What's your sexual background? How do you feel about it? Where do you see yourself bringing stuff to this table?
Sure. Well, essentially, I come from a background that's more sensual than sexual. Mm-hmm. To me, sex is a very sacred thing, and it's something that you do with someone who you would like to intertwine your energies with. It's not something that, like, for myself personally, and I don't judge others who have others or other ideas about it, but for me, it's a very sacred act. And so if I'm going to pull someone into my womb, I want to make sure that I could be that person. Because if I can't be that person, then they're not welcome into my sacred territory. And that was my understanding growing up as well. So, I mean, I lost my virginity at a very late age. And I always looked at it as a very ritualistic thing. However, prior to that, I was always very sensual with men. And I still continue to wear the sensuality act on my sleeve before I ever invite any type of sexuality. Reason being is because, like I had said, if I can't be you, then I don't want you in my territory. And to me, sensuality and tantra is actually part of my regime. I find that connecting to someone on a tantric level, and not a sexual tantra, but just a connection tantra, can actually be more, what's the word I'm looking for? It can be more fulfilling than the act of sex itself. So that's really my take on it. And that's what I'm really bringing forth, is to share with people how to activate sensually instead of sexually, unless they want to bring that person into their territory.
Excellent.
What about you, Kelly?
Well, I started out, I was a virgin till I was 19 years old. When I was young, my father told me, your kisses are like hamburgers, and if you give them away for free, you're going to go bankrupt. And my little mind went, oh my God, he's right. You can't just give stuff away. You're going to go bankrupt. So I held my sexuality for a very long time. And I was kind of very, I'd only had sex with one person up until the age of 26. And then after that, I kind of experienced a little bit. And then I got into a really abusive relationship. And he basically accused me of cheating with everyone. He stripped me of everything. I wasn't allowed to look at people. It doesn't matter if it was a female waitress or a male waitress. I was trying to seduce them, and he was always accusing me of being this slut and whore and all these things. So when I left that relationship, I was a shell of myself, and I needed to restructure who I was sexually, because he basically killed all of my sexual energy. And from that, I became a dominatrix, because it was the only thing I could think of to do to take back my sexuality. And through that, I healed men. I helped men cry it out in a way that was incredible. And I took back my sexuality, and I helped people get through their own sexuality blocks from my own pain, which is, where I ended up. So I no longer dom, because after a while it became now I was just in service to them, and I don't want, my time was done. So I needed to move on. And now I've been single for a long time. I have a sexual partner that but I keep him at a distance, because I'm not ready to love yet, because I'm still kind of working through that stuff. So that's me in a nutshell right now.
Thank you for being so candid. Yeah. So what do you ladies think of commercial sex? I mean, we kind of touched on it already, maybe by what everybody's just said, but how do you feel about it? Kimberly, what do you?
Well, I would like to see it decriminalized. I think we would see a lot more. Mariana, beautiful story that you were able to have that around you, that influence around you to really instill in you that it was sacred. And so I think that we would see a lot more of that if decriminalization happened. I think that a lot of the issues that we see around even the word prostitution, I mean, it's the oldest profession. This story goes deep.
But what about talking about the root of it too? Like, why do men need prostitutes? You know what I mean? Like, what's going on at home that they need prostitutes? Why is it that women can't give their husband blowjobs? Like, honestly, a lot of men that I talk to, I work in construction, I work with all these men, and they're always telling me, my wife, she's so boring, and it's like, you can't expect to have a fulfilling relationship if you go dormant after a while, And
there are a lot of, I mean, this is a very important.
Like, as a dominatrix, I had clients, and all they wanted was to get slapped on the penis. So honestly, we never had sex. I never touched his penis. I always slapped it with an implement, and that's all he wanted. He stood with his hands behind his head, and his wife would not do that for him. And I find that is like, if you're in a sacred union with somebody, and even though it's something weird, you should be able to, at least help them out with that kink and figure out what it is that causes them. Why do they want to get smacked in the penis?
Yeah. Well, before I ask you a question about that, I'm just curious, Marina, how do you feel about commercial sex? What is it like, right now in the world?
I feel that it should be decriminalized as well, because anytime you tell a society that they can't do something, that then creates a perversion in it. And I think that they've made it something that's wrong, when indeed some people need that outlet. You know, it's like Kelly was saying, what's the root of a man needing his wife to slap him on the penis, and why is she not doing that?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? So I fully agree that it should not be criminalized in the way that it is, because it's creating a gap and a separation in society, where we do need to have our sexual desires fulfilled. And they make it such a bad and wrong and dirty thing, when it's very sacred, and it's part of everyday life. It's part of what we need to do, and we need to exercise.
Yeah,
So,
I agree.
There's so much shame. There's so much shame when it comes to sex. And I think that that's really what's programmed into us as children. Don't touch yourself. Don't look at other people. Don't watch porno. Don't do this. Don't do that. And like Marina said, it is the second you say don't do that, they start feeling wounded. And then it's like, why am I so weird? Why am I so strange? And then they got to go hiding. And then they're going, they're retracting from whoever's around them and becoming more and more introvert, because their sexuality is not forthcoming for most people.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel. I feel like commercial sex, the way it is now globally, exploits more than it creates like healthy.
I feel like that about porno. I think porno versus.
Wait, let me just finish talking, Kelly. So I think it creates creates more unhealthy environments. It exploits more than it creates healthy environments as it is now. In my mind, I think I agree with both of you. It's the shame and it's the repression of it that's made it what it is today. And that because of that, it's become so shadowy, and all of these things can exist where there's violence against women, where there's exploitation of children. And if we were really healthy about our own sexuality and felt free with it and didn't feel so shameful about it, then we would be able to, we wouldn't even need a commercial sex industry, because we would just be allowing ourselves to go where we need to go in order to feel satisfied and, and to be in a good space, in a good space with ourselves and others. So I think I'm totally torn. For me, I'm totally torn. I think the commercial sex industry needs to exist in the way society exists today, because it's a need that needs to be fulfilled, and it's repressed, and there's too much shame around it. So it has to exist somewhere. But I think it should be legalized so that there is some sort of regulatory body protecting, people who are vulnerable. Because that's the side that I saw most. I saw mostly the vulnerable side, the people that were being exploited. So that I hold that close to my heart. And
so decriminalized or legalized, because there is a difference there.
What's the difference? Give us the.
Well, decriminalized means that it's not even part of the legal system. It's not even, you can't, it's just, legalized means, I don't know, probably like get a permit. Not that it's the difference between having personal responsibility guide, like you choose, like you.
It's tricky. I was reading up about all this stuff last night, and it just gets really technical and really heady.
Basically, I just don't think the state should be involved in anything. I think I've made that pretty clear. So it's personal responsibility. And so if people want to join together and, they want to, it's voluntary action. So they, if they want to going to the doctor, it's just self-responsibility. It's not having the government have anything to do with it. And that's just, the more that we talk, the more that I'm sure that that core philosophy will come out, and I'll be better prepared to even tell you the difference between decriminalization and legalization, because it's with weed too. Decriminalizing it means that there's not even a possibility for it to.
It's a sticky situation, definitely, when it comes to sex and sex work and all that. But I do feel like it needs to be regulated if it is commercialized as it is right now. that's where I stand, I guess, on that. So going into some of the other questions that I have, I mean, I'm really interested, Kelly, in what you were saying earlier about, you know, like through commercial sex, some people are finding healing, you know, and they can't really find that elsewhere.
It's the truth.
Mm-hmm.
It's the truth. I dealt with a lot of people who were locked in time. They got caught masturbating when they were young by an aunt or their mothers, and there was so much shame that it created this lock in time for them. And it's really, you know, I think that we should be talking about shame and sex more than we should be talking about, you know, criminalizing prostitution. Some prostitutes love their job. they're having sex, they're going shopping, they're living a life of a rock star basically, and they're having great sex. Some of their clients are great lovers. It's not like they're having sex with an old fat guy in the back of an alley. You know, not all prostitution is disgusting. Some of it is beautiful and sacred, and it's just as nice as the other stuff. What we need to be talking about is like, what is driving men to go to these prostitutes at the time? If you're single, sure, you know, but like if you're in a committed relationship, what's going on? What do you need to
I think that's the word right there, is committed relationship. I think that, you know, we're slowly moving into these conscious relationships, and we're opening up into different, I mean, if you go back in time, like we're just sort of repeat, because the way it used some of the ancient cultures, you know, women would select who they wanted to have sex with, and they were allowed to change, you know, it was constantly changing, like they weren't committed to just one person and had to only have sex with one person. They were allowed to, you know, be attracted to different men, and then, you know, ask those men to join them at different points in time. So if we had that freedom, I think that would definitely help. I think for me anyway, like diversity always creates a healthy environment, like, you know, in nature. And so I feel like diversity is something I've always been drawn to. In my personal life, in my relationships, after a little while, I feel like I need diversity to spark things up, you know? So if I had that freedom, which, you know, you often have when you're single, which is why I love the single life, you know, is you have that diversity and there's no restraints. So maybe if men had that, you know, they had that in their lives, and they didn't have to depend on one woman to have sex with all the time, it would work.
Well, I have to say this to that. I spent a summer taking couples home and making them have sex in front of me as one of my hobbies. And I would convince couples to come over and just have sex in front of me. And I would just coach them through their sex and watch them and just fool around with the girl, but never touch the man, ever, because I respected their boundaries and I wanted to create a safe space for her so that they could truly express themselves. And a lot of these couples after would send me messages saying, thank you so much. You rekindled our love life. You showed us that you could go out there and have fun sexually without risking our relationship. And we really appreciate that. So, you know, couples need to go out there. They need to talk about their sexual fantasies, and then they need to go out and play a little, I think, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. What about you, Marina? Anything to add to that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think there's an author, I think his name is Chris Ryan. He wrote the book Sex at Dawn. And it talks about how, like, in tribal societies, there's more success of people having not only a healthier sex life, but also a healthier relationship life. Because of the fact that love was basically free and there wasn't borders. And, you know, it was really promoting the way of polyamory, which for myself personally, like, for me as a person, it doesn't work, but I mean, for other people, it's definitely a route. And I totally agree with it, because sometimes you're in a relationship and you need to explore different connections that you have with other people. And if you're in a relationship that says, no, you can't do that, then that's where we end up with that suppression. That's where we end up with that guilt or that shame. And then it ends up turning into this terrible combustion where there's something unaligned that has to happen in order for the couples to go back into that alignment with each other. So I think rather than going through that, it's better to just be brutally honest. And I remember a few years ago, I was dating a guy and I started to develop feelings for someone else. And instead of acting on my desire, I spoke about it to him first. And I said, like, I'm starting to have feelings for this man and I really would like to explore that. Is that okay with you? And he said, yes. So, I mean, I think it's beautiful and it's very healthy to have that kind of communication style with your beloveds. And I think it's better not to suppress anything in terms of that realm, because when you suppress, that's where we have all these unaligned behaviors that come out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. I think the problem then becomes the, you know, the jealousy, and a lot of people are not ready for that. You know, it is a lot to process emotionally when you're in a partnership with someone, and you know, because it brings up all the insecurities, and yeah. So that's not easy, but definitely there are a lot of like, there's this little place that I go to, and there's a beautiful river, and I often sit there. You could see the stars really well, and there are so many men between, you know, 40 and about 60 that will come over and, you know, try to see if maybe I'm a prostitute. Try to just to, and I know that it's very obvious that that's what they're doing. What's that?
Do they do this?
No, no, but it's, you know, there's like, it's just very obvious. And I think that age group, especially, I hear from a lot of women that, you know, after being in a relationship for such a long time, they lose interest, they lose sexual interest in their partner. Like, that's a very common thing that I've heard from many different women. You know, and that's where the diversity comes in. And then, you know, there's a lot of men in that age group. I know in Montreal, there's a lot of rub and tug parlors and massage parlors that are, you know, and a lot of women that have told me, you know, I haven't had sex with my partner in 5 years, or I haven't had sex in a really long time. Like, I hear that a lot from women of that age group. So no wonder there's a need for commercial sex at that point, you know, for men at that age, if it's still a need for them.
I think you hit the nail on the head there when you said communication, right? And I think that that's at the root of a lot of relationship demises, is when you stop communicating, you know, you stop expressing yourself, and you stop caring, then the person stops caring how you feel, because you're not even expressing yourself anymore.
Mm-hmm.
You
It just gets very toxic.
Yeah.
And the denial, and, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, and then you start resenting each other. Then you're like, oh, they're holding me back. They're holding me back. But really, you're not saying anything to your partner, saying, oh, this is really bothering me. I really want you to stick your underwear in my mouth and put me in the corner. You know? Like, that's what I really want deep down inside. But they can't say it. So there's so much shame wrapped around all these sexual kinks that there's no shame in it. I can tell you firsthand. I went out there and did it all. I did it all. I took a man to a mall, and like a dog, and tied him up outside and left him, and went inside and did my grocery shopping, and came back, and he carried all my bags. He was wearing nothing but a thong, and on his chest I wrote, dumpster, come dumpster, on his chest, you know? That's what that guy wanted. It's a little extreme, but it's not that harsh when you think about it. Go to a different town where you know nobody.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
So what was his healing in this? I'm just curious. Was there a healing, or
I don't know that not all sessions are about healing. You know, some of them are just about the itch that you need to scratch. And
that is the healing.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of people, once they go through that, they never have to come back. They fantasize about it so much, and then they do it, and they're like, oh, it's over.
Okay, that's enough. Yeah. You know,
I didn't really want that. It was good in theory. It's like lesbianism. It's a great idea. I think about women all the time. I want to have sex with them, and then when there's an actual woman in front of me, I'm like, oh no, maybe not.
So this brings up the question of, can dirty sex be sacred, or can like really profane sex like that be sacred? Sure. And how do you define that in your mind? Like, what?
I think that's up to two consenting adults that are not initiating force or fraud on each other.
No, and that's why you have a conversation before you start. You talk, hey, let's do this. We're going to play it like this. I like this. I like that. You like this. Okay, let's go.
Yeah.
You know, you have a little dialogue.
What is sacred to, like, what is your definition of sacred?
Well, to me, there's sex, and then there's sacred sex. You know, not all sex is sacred to me. Sometimes I just want to go to Pound Town, and I don't need it to be this, like, you know, I stare into your eyes. You know, I think that not all sex is sacred, but it is not to say that it's bad. You know, it's more like a masturbation with a partner.
Okay, I want to hear from everybody else on that.
Yeah.
I think it goes down to intent as well. And I feel that as long as your intent is, you know, in the right space, I mean, for example, like you might really love your partner, but sometimes you just really need rough, hard sex from them. I don't see anything wrong with that. I don't think that there's any kind of profanity in that at all, because the intent is so pure. It's just like your body just needs to be moved that way. You need to be touched that way. You need to be spoken to in a dirty way, you know? And, you know, I think it just boils down to intent, essentially.
Yeah.
Kimberly, what do you think?
Yeah, for me, it's as long as it's two consenting adults that aren't initiating some sort of force. You're not being forced to do it, you know, and it's not fraudulent. You know, it's you're agreeing to it. Then I think that's a sacred contract. You're honoring the other person and have fun. And that's, I mean, that's infinite. Like you know, that's we're individuals, right? I mean, you know, so it's hard to say what's, I think for me, yeah, it boils down to not being forceful or fraudulent in your intention. I would agree with Marianne on that one.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's difficult one because, I mean, we're human, right? We're half animal and we're half like these divine beings. So, and sacred life is sacred, and so it encompasses all of that. But for me, it's really about staying connected to the person, like feeling connected to their intention, feeling connected to their energy, and feeling safe in that. That's, you know, whether it's dirty sex or whether it's like, you know, making love. As long as I feel connected to that person. If not, I kind of disconnect from myself, disconnect from my own body very easily that way.
See, I'm very good at that. That's why I was able to do what I did, is I was disconnected from my body at a very young age. And so I've grown in to what I would understand to be more of a sacred, I'm out of the biz, if you will. I've been away from LA for 10 years. I'm married. I have a very different life, but intimacy has been a challenge. I have struggled with complex post-traumatic responses, and intimacy brings that up. It has been, it's been a journey. And so when I was in character, if you will, like anything went. It just wasn't, I've got some stories that you're telling about the one with your guy, and I have 10 that pop up that, you see things and you realize that this whole sex thing is pretty important to untangle, because there's some serious issues out there. And when you're dealing in, mine happened to be in domination as well, because I got really good at, I didn't want to fuck anybody.
Oh, you're gonna have to repeat that because we didn't hear you.
I didn't want to see you again. I wasn't trying to fuck anybody, so that's why the whole domination thing was appealing to me at a certain point in my travels, if you will. And I saw things though that I had empathy and compassion, even though I was very traumatized on some level by the experience, just because it's such a interesting one. The things people, for example, I had a man in trust fund banker kid that he wanted me to put his wife's toothbrush up my ass. And the whole time sit there reading magazines, shopping, spending fucking insane amount of money with my heels on his balls, telling him what a piece of shit he was. And at the time I was calling my girlfriends like, hey, let's pay some bills. But at the end of it, I could have, he handed over all of his information and was basically like, here, you can blackmail me with this, because if my family finds out I do this again, I'm cut off. So who knows what's real either, but he called me crying, begging for me to rip that up. And I was like, look, I'm going to rip it up. don't ever call me again. But really look at why you wanted me to put your wife's toothbrush up my ass. That's a pretty hateful act.
Yeah.
And you might want to look at the issue with your mom. I'm speculating here, but I mean, so it was like, here, I'm going to hand you a bunch of free therapy, and I'm not going to take your bullshit again. But, what he did with it, who knows? But you realize that that's out there.
It's really interesting. Yeah, it's really interesting because, sexual energy is our life force, right? And it ties into, I was doing some research and I just want to read you ladies a quote. So according to the existentialist approach, commodification violates the intimate relationship between sex and the self, and also between sex and human flourishing. And so, everything that we do, like our passions, are tied into our sexuality. How we express ourselves in the world, like our abundance, like we could talk about magnetism, right? And how much we can create for ourselves in the world. And so it seems like so much gets funneled through that channel, through sex and our sexual expression. Our traumas, like the creation of abundance, the creation of all the good things, and also all the bad things. And it's just like, it's that life force, right? It's everything stems to that. So it is such an important issue. It is, we're talking about it because it's important. But I guess this is just making me reflect on how, like, if within the commercial industry, there was more healing going on, kind of what you're bringing, Marina, with, connecting more with sensuality, which touches on that life force, which touches on the sexuality. I mean, that's really what, where people can do the healing work. So I guess the commercial sex industry, when the intention isn't to do that, it's just kind of like these things happen, but then we don't get to the bottom of the healing. We don't, so it's great that sorry, I just kind of went off on a rampage, but I think it's great that you asked him to reflect on, why is that? Why, how did that come about? Because it's obvious there's a lot of maybe resentment towards his wife, or, who knows?
Well, I think that's too where, I wasn't trying, my intention was never to hurt anyone. I was doing my own thing. And so I could go into very odd situations because I was so disconnected, but my intention was always to have the highest outcome. And I was involved too, I'm there. So I think I just got so overwhelmed, like I just couldn't do it anymore. And I think that, Kelly, one thing when we had the conversation about our experiences was, you just get to a place where you are just done. And I was, and I had been for a long time. It took me moving out of LA because it's somewhat addictive in some ways as well.
It's easy money. It's easy work.
It afforded me a very nice life in Santa Monica, California, and got back through, put myself through acting school. I, had a radio and internet TV show. I to further myself along. So I have, nothing but love for, even that darker side of myself, because I believe that anybody under the right circumstances can do anything. So, and again, I think that legalization, decriminalization, I think that gets rid of a lot of these systemic problems, because that's a lot of the judgment, I think, even coming from women, a lot of times, like, oh, she's a hooker. It's like, come on, or even when I was stripping, it was like, a lot of the girls were like, I'm not a hooker. And I was like, first off, I hate fucking dancing. I'm going to go make a lot more fucking money, and I don't have to put up with these douchebags teasing me with $1 because they're so fucking awesome. And they're shit-faced. It's like, fuck you. Like, I had no patience for dancing. And when I did, I just kind of stood there and like, it wasn't my thing. So, I just think that, again.
It's really interesting. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Just, you know, there is that stigma against prostitution. I think because of the exploitation, you know, on a global scale.
I saw it just continue, or even like, you know, to me, like the Hawaiian Tropic girls and the pageant girls, they're all up in that, but they'll never tell you they're doing anything. And I found them to be some of the most dishonest women in relationships. And it was truly about, you know, it just wasn't, I kept it very real. There was never any, when I met someone, there was never any like, oh, I'm never going to tell him I did this or anything like that. It was like, no, that's just, you know, it is what it is. And I was going to be okay with that. I am okay with that. It's a continual process of being okay with it. Even having these conversations brings up a lot of things I haven't talked about in a long time.
Yeah, there's, you know, there's a lot of famous people that were also, you know, that went through prostitution at one point, including Maya Angelou. She was a prostitute for a few years. I don't know exactly. Yeah, exactly how many, but, and she talks about it in, you know, in one of her books, in one of her memoirs, Gathered Together in My Name. And the reason why, you know, she asked her family, like, is this okay? Because there is such a stigma around it. She really wanted young women to know that, you know, if the younger people, like even in the family, you know, often families hide their secrets. They hide all the skeletons in the closet, and that places a lot of pressure on the younger generations to be perfect, when really, you know, we're all going like this on our travels and touching different things, and it doesn't mean that you can't become you know, an amazing award-winning writer, or, you know, do great things just because you've been a prostitute, right? So it doesn't taint the rest of your life, and like you have to stay as a prostitute because, you know, that's the label that you now have, and you can't step outside of that. Like you can basically do everything. And dive into, you know,
I think that if everything collapsed tomorrow, a lot of women would find themselves happily, maybe not happily, obviously if everything collapsed, that might not be such a happy experience. But again, under the right circumstances, anybody will do anything. And I think this whore archetype, the virgin and the whore, it's another divisive strategy, you know, male, female, black, white, gay, straight. It just the divisiveness of that. And I think that I saw a lot of men that they just couldn't do those sort of things with their wife. She's the virgin that has my kids. I find that just delving into those archetypes is very interesting, and how it plays out on the world stage.
Well, let's talk about it on a primal level. If they gave a bunch of monkeys biscuits, and the monkeys right away started giving the biscuits to the females for sex, and the females were like, yeah, take that cookie. Yeah.
Give us the biscuits.
It comes down, it's like, it's so primal deep down inside. The exchange for sex, for services rendered, or money for services rendered, it's even in the animal kingdom. You know, it's not just for human beings. It's actually happening even at the most simplistic level.
Sure.
You know?
The oldest profession. I mean,
it is the oldest profession. I got goosebumps all over my body because that means the truth. You know?
Yeah.
But I do want to talk about sex magic then a little bit, because like I practice a lot of sex magic. Like I cultivate my energy by touching myself a little bit and then cutting myself off so that I'm like ramped up, but I can't flow. And then I go to work and people are like, oh my God. Like my energy is so palpable. I walk into the room and I look at guys and they're like, whatever you want, I will do it for you. Because in my mind, I'm like picturing myself giving them a blowjob, and I'm like, you know, creating this sexual energy attachment to them. And then they will do anything I want, basically. And in my role in construction, I need everybody to do their job. So this is a way that I've learned that I can convince people. So I use my sexual energy in the quantum to manipulate people into doing favors for me out in the real world. And it works like a charm. Every single day I do it.
Wow, that's very candid. What about you, Marina? I know that you work with magnetism and for abundance and all that.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, the coolest thing was when I was dating Nassim Haramein, he was like telling me, you know, like when you orgasm, you're creating galaxies.
Yeah.
And I truly believe that. And I also, Kelly, I love what you said, because cultivating that sexual energy, getting yourself to that peak, you're creating a magnetic resonance around you. That's what it does. And so many people don't understand that. That's why Tantra, like the real ancient versions of Tantra, not the Western convoluted sexual encounter of Tantra, but the ancient one is all about like getting yourself to that point and then stopping and holding that energy and keeping it, because that's your force field. You're expanding your force field.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, you become very magnetic, kinetic, and absolutely, you know, people can't say no to you. You can't say no to yourself even. You can't. You're just like, I'll do anything for you now. Like I've held this orgasm, so now I'm going to do anything for you.
Yes.
And it unlocks a part of your creativity as well. And actually recently I told my lover, I said, you know, like, I want you to not ejaculate for the next couple of weeks, because we're trying to cultivate his Jing. And for those of the future viewers, or for anyone that's here, Jing is all about your primordial life force essence. So if you don't have Jing, then you don't have a thing. And for men, it's actually better if they don't ejaculate, and if they, you know, hold in that energy, it creates more creativity. And women, it's a little different. We can orgasm a lot and still be magnetic, but even more so if we practice that as well, it does increase. But with the orgasm, if you can visualize what it is that you want, that moment that you are orgasming, that's when you're bringing more of it to life. That's when you're creating galaxies. That's when you're creating that out there in the etheric realm.
And that's why a lot of men get depressed when they orgasm.
Yeah.
A lot of men get depressed and they fall asleep. A lot of times they just have to go to sleep because they can't handle they were so high and now they're so low. And it's better for them to not ejaculate.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
I agree. So I'm listening to this, and I find myself very susceptible in general to people's sexual energy because of the generational wounds. So if I'm walking down the street and like I'll feel people's sexual energy, you know, and I'll feel the intention, because there's different qualities of sexual energy. You know, if it's, you know, less of a good intention, or just kind of like I don't know how to describe it, like more of a creepy kind of, you know, looking at me in a way that's not honoring me, that's more objectifying me. For me, that's creepy. I automatically feel that energy as a negative, and I want to move away from it. And, you know, once you start dipping into shamanism and you start feeling energy more, and you're understanding how things are connected in the quantum, and, you know, I think you become more and more picky about the quality of energy that you're sharing with people, and exactly the intentions behind it, because you want it to be sacred. So yeah, there's like, it's a double-edged sword, you know, because we can easily take advantage of men. And I see women doing that all the time. And I found it disturbing, because it is very easy to use your sexuality just to basically hypnotize a man and to get him to do it, you know, what you want. And that's where the whole gold digger thing comes in, right? Is that a woman can easily take advantage of a man's bank account if she wants to, through her sexuality. And so there's all these different, and, you know, coming back around and coming back into this whole divine feminine, divine masculine rising movement, you know, and sort of like, where does this all play into that movement, you know? I think we should touch on that before we get cut off, because it will cut off very soon again in about 6 minutes. And maybe, I'm not sure if we should end it there, but I think that we should at least touch on that, the divine feminine and the divine rising movement, and where sexuality plays into that. And, you know, how does it influence? I don't even know how to structure this sentence, because there's just, like, we talked about so much already, and it went from completely profane but being sacred to you know, to being very pure and enlightening. So does anybody want to talk about that? Does anybody have anything to say about how all of this would fit into the divine feminine?
I do want to say, I went to Egypt earlier this year, and I had a profound kundalini just
activation.
Yeah, it was so amazing. And I think that I'll just keep that one for, we'll come back to that.
So, yeah, that's it. Once your kundalini starts going, things just change dramatically. It's beautiful to watch women go through it. I mean, can be very painful, but for me, it was a very painful process, just because it pushed up so much trauma to the surface. But yeah, it can be a really beautiful experience.
And I think because it was in Egypt, and I had been, you know, the whole, you know, outside of the box spirituality. So Isis is kind of the starter kit for, you know, Egypt came in first when you start working with archetypes, or at least for me. And so I had, you know, the whole, I felt very connected to Isis. I didn't have any real energetic connection to the pyramids. I felt nothing. I didn't like going down in them. It just was not, for me, all that pleasant. But out at the temple of Isis, temple of Hathor, it was amazing. And I felt that in the ethers, like that it's so right there, and that there is a great awakening happening around this subject. Mm-hmm. Like, it's, you know, humans are ready to use their voice on this subject, because I don't want to leave the men out, as far as, you know, there are men in the industry as well.
And men are dying for women to have this awakening. God damn it, when we do, there's going to be plenty of sex for everyone.
So is the divine feminine, oh, sorry, did I cut you off, Marina?
Oh, no, it's okay. You go ahead.
Is the divine feminine, or what you saying, is what you are saying that the divine feminine rising movement is related to women awakening up to their sexuality? Is that what I'm understanding? Is that?
And I think also the lies and the trickery around that subject. I think we're seeing a revealing, a truth that's coming out, that there's an alchemy happening, and unless you're living under a rock and you're absolutely willfully ignorant, that is a possibility. But if not, I think that there's some alchemy happening, and these subjects are being held up in a mirror, and how people are seeing them obviously is an individual thing, but there is that alchemy happening, and that these subjects are being talked about more than ever. I'm no fan of, like, I don't like the Me Too movement, big stuff like that. I think those things get hijacked, but it did start a conversation, and you know, it was mainstream. Then once it goes mainstream, go the other direction and find other people, because there's trolls and people that are paid to hijack those big movements, in my experience.
Yeah, yeah. It's kind of like
shows like this are where it's at, you know, and lots of them, and you know, everybody get a station and tell your story.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I believe, like, the divine feminine rising movement did start with the feminine movement, with the feminist movement back in, like, 1848, you know, and then for me, where it really gets solidified is Women Who Run with Wolves. Have you read that book? I find that
Which one?
Women Who Run with Wolves.
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
Clarissa Estes. I find that to me, that is the divine feminine rising, like that book, you know, in our modern world. All right. So, Marina, what do you have to say about that? Like
Yeah, I mean, this topic can be very long and lengthy, and it can really go in a lot of different tangents, especially because I'm so passionate about it. But I think what it boils down to is three things, and may these words hit everyone in a different way. But I think what this embodies truly is alchemy, purity, perception. And I feel that these divine feminine, divine masculine, all it is it's a sacred return back to love in purity. Because once you're viewing life from the eyes of purity, from the heart of purity, nothing is poison anymore. It's all pleasure. But it's also very heavenly too. And so I feel that this is just simply a return back to purity. And that's where the alchemy plays in.
Get your shame and guilt out of the pleasure.
Get it out of the field. Exactly.
Purify that. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Are there any things excluded from that, or like I'm just curious what if there's
No, because when something is rooted in purity, it could do no harm. And to me, that's the root of purity, is doing no harm. So we don't have all the stigma around things, because it's rooted in purity, in love, in truth. They all come from the same place. Time and space. Gravity and grace.
Yeah. So as long, I mean, so there's the perception of, you know, what you seek is what you'll find. So if you're looking for purity, then you'll find more purity, you'll find more love. And then I guess whatever's healthy, you know, if something's...
Whatever is sustainable. Yeah. Because purity and sustainability are interconnected as well. So when something is sustainable, you know it's coming from truth, you know it's coming from purity, you know it's coming from beauty. That's just the way this reality is constructed. There's no way around it.
What about you, Kelly?
Well, I'm going to leave us on this note. I think we need to all stop judging and work on stop judging people so that we can stop judging ourselves so harshly. And it really starts with that. You know, we foresee people judging us, and that's what creates our shame. You know, but we're out there judging people from the second we wake up in the morning to the second we go to bed at night. And we need to get to the root of that. And I think judgment is a big part of that. You know, judging people and confining them by your own judgments is why we're in this mess to begin with. And we need to step away from, you know, judging people at every moment of the day and start just looking at ourselves and trying to find our own version of happiness and unconditional love within our own worlds without judging other people.
Yeah, I agree. I do agree, though, that I also think that we all have our subjective lenses, and, you know, the judgments come from there. They come from our past experiences. And, you know, if someone has had really negative experiences in a particular thing, then they're going to have prejudices against that. And they are definitely going to have judgments that might be real for them, right? So we're kind of dealing with everybody's different, you know, everybody's history, where they come from is different, their sensitivities are different. But I think at the end of the day, for me, you know, I can kind of remove myself from that. I see when I have these personal judgments come up, you know, and I work through them consciously all the time. But I have also this greater sort of, you know, I feel like I have this mission to kind of not only heal myself, but to help bring the world into greater sustainability. And so it's easy to kind of just go, yeah, you know, I won't judge anybody, which technically we're talking about ideas, we're not talking about people, but we can still judge ideas, and we can still judge movements and where our society is going and where things are unhealthy and where things are healthy. And I think that breeds progressive movements towards things. So I kind of, you know, I agree, but I think we still have to be discerning, and we still have to be foreseeing, and really first take care of ourselves always. And then, you know, and then also discuss bigger ideas about, you know, is commercial sex sustainable? Is it sustainable? I don't think it's personally sustainable. Most of the people
What do you
I
mean
know,
by sustainable?
Sustainable being something that someone can do for a very prolonged period of time without it hindering their health on an emotional level, mental level, physical level. I think there's a small percentage of people that can live a whole life.
I would agree. I would agree. And that's been my, I mean, you know, I was 15 years, well, if you count the sneaking into, or not sneaking, but being a waitress at a strip club to start, but if that's my start date, then that was more like 19. If not, I'm looking at 23 years old. And I was, you know, done at 37, 38, and many psychotic breaks, dealt with flashbacks, trauma. I mean, it was absolutely, I would agree that I would say that most of the women that I knew and that I have met along the way have unresolved childhood trauma, and that there was very few that were just naturally like, that's what I want to do. Now, if we took away the other stigmas, we could have many more. And I think because of the commercialization, I think that there are many more out there that are fine. But if you're, like in my case, it was childhood trauma, and I can see how that sexual trauma, and I can see how that navigated choices in my life. And so we talk about mental health, and do you really want to be doing this? And you know, that's where the unicorn way and finding your true north is. You know, if somebody had been there to ask me if that was really my true north, and really talk to me through some of the decisions I made, I probably wouldn't have made them. I think I would have been more of a writer and written about them. So I think I would have, I still believe that I would have been up in it, but I think that I would be more along the lines of where I'm at now at 49 years old. And that's having these kind of discussions, talking about it, writing about it. You know, I've always been one that likes to talk about the elephant in the room. And I don't think that, you know, I just think my path would have been different. So I think that talking about trauma and really hoping that people that are in the commercialized part of it, if you're having, you know, I was having psychotic breaks. So, and I certainly wasn't going to go talk to anybody. And the one time I did, they wanted to put me on Adderall, and I went even crazier. You know, it wasn't dealing with the trauma that I was reliving constantly because of early childhood trauma. So I think that's something to explore too when we talk about commercialization of it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I agree. Yeah, I wonder if there are any programs in place, like, or how many programs there are for sex workers to go and talk about childhood trauma. Like, if that's, you know, if it's not, I mean, Montreal is very big. There's a huge number of women that are sex workers. I know a few. You know, I've been around the environment. You can't help it being in Montreal, and a lot of them seem really happy. But yeah, a lot of them, you know, you end up holding space for after they get out of the industry.
Sure.
So I mean, it would be great if it was regulated, because then they can put these programs in place, you know, for women to talk about during. So if they do realize, wait, this is actually related to my childhood trauma, and this isn't, you know, a pleasure path for me, that they have that space to work it out. And
yeah, but I also want to say that it was very empowering as well. And so, you know, that's the kind of the conflict is that, and maybe that's where acting school came in for me, was it helped me to kind of put myself back together and realize how I could disassociate and but there were less. So I don't really think that it was really the mental health that needs to change. The professions, what even qualified to talk about this stuff, because it was like, you got nothing for me. I can't really tell you what's going on, because in my mind, you know, this is a guy that's just sitting there, spaced out, not really, you know.
He
I'm not
can't
really,
relate to you.
what's that?
He can't relate to you.
No, no.
No.
And then you start getting into the dynamics of legalities, and you know, you're afraid to talk about certain things. And there were a lot of times that I would love to have reported people. There was stuff going on, but you know, who are you going to tell? Most of the people you're going to go tell are part of it. You know, and that goes down to the whole system. Is a lot of the trafficking, and that's systemic. That's on purpose. That's to keep.
Do you think it exists with,
keep a
sorry,
food supply.
keep it what?
To keep a food supply. You know, there's, what I mean by that is an energetic supply of, you know, they're down here, and you know, a lot of the kids that are being trafficked, they're foster kids. They've been up in the system. They're, you know, they don't have a voice, and that's where it's important to the decriminalization, legalization takes a lot of that away, in my opinion. You know.
Sure. Does anybody have anything that they want to add to this whole discussion before we stop recording and make it a wrap? We touched on a lot of different things and really went all over the board.
Go back and hone in on some things, and for a second show, different guests, you know, the more the merrier that want to talk this stuff. And you know, I'd love to see a continued discussion. And thank you, each and every one of you, for being here, and it's awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for to the audience for joining us. You can check out we'll go around and everybody can say exactly what their contact is, and so you can reach me at just basically my Facebook page right now, or my Instagram, which is Blasting Love, and my name is Jessica Darlington. And Kimberly, where can everyone reach you?
Right now, the best place is on Facebook, The Unicorn Way, and on Instagram, Brighton 444. I guess that's not really a good place to like reach and message out. So The Unicorn Way on Facebook is the best way to get hold of me.
Marina, do you want to share your contact info and your business? Or?
Yeah, well, my blog, I haven't been updating it as often as I would like to, but you're welcome to check it out. It's www.lovemovement.ca. And then my website, marinalove.love, is under construction. So the best way for now is Facebook, Marina Love, and then on Instagram, Marina_love_movement.
Thank you. And Kelly, thank you so much for joining us and sharing your story. Thank you, everyone, for sharing your wisdom and your experiences. It takes a lot of courage just to open up and to share publicly for other women to hear and to take what they need to grow from it. And yeah, women just need to talk more in general, and especially on really poignant topics. And yeah, topics like this that a lot of women, taboo topics, topics that people don't want to talk about too much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jess.
Thank you.
Marina. Thank
Thank
you.
you.